What seemed like a great idea until you gave it a go? Write in the comments what you think about this. Enjoy the show. Story 1. I wanted to sterilize a glass jar before creating a sourdough starter in it. I put it in the oven for 10 minutes or so, then set it out to cool. I thought that running it underwater would speed up the calling process. Ended up with glass in the sink. Not fun. Story 2. I thought that organizing a big party with homemade food would be fun and impressive, but when I started doing it, I was overwhelmed by the amount of work, spoiled ingredients, and not enough preparation time, leading to a messy and unexpected party. Story 3. Overeating. You think you could finish the entire bulk of food either because it's so delicious or you don't want to waste it. You think, it's just a bit more to go, or it's fine, I will deal with the consequences easily later on. But dang, some indigestion cases make you want to die and make you regret so much. Story 4. Trying to watch myself sneeze. I told myself that I could just keep my eyes open when I sneeze and didn't need a camera as long as I sneezed in front of a mirror. I regret not getting this on camera because I definitely laugh at it today, but I sneezed and slammed my head into our tile countertop. I was fine, didn't have a concussion or anything, but man, it was the worst idea I have ever had. Story 5. When I was 13, I started becoming obsessed with getting a skateboard, watching tutorials, videos of people doing tricks, and I thought it'd make me super cool and I'd go out and show off. Kept nagging my parents for it, pestering them until they finally got me one. They wouldn't let me go outside to play with it alone, so I had the greatest idea. I decided I'd practice indoors, in our tiny house with a tile floor. The ground was super smooth, so I thought it'd work. I then kept trying to learn for a couple of days. I didn't have any protection gear and I was terrible and couldn't sustain my balance for more than 1 second. Literally 2 days later, as I was practicing, it slipped from under my foot, and in a moment I was falling forward, head first. I quickly braced myself and protected my body with my arm, and I felt the impact literally vibrate through my entire forearm. I stood up in shock, felt my forearm completely numb, heavy, and buzzing, and I just knew. I screamed dramatically and my dad called out of work to take me to the hospital. I waited the whole day to finally have an x-ray done, and turns out I broke both my ulna and radius. My parents were financially struggling and it took me 14 days to get the surgery done in the cheapest hospital surgeon they could find. And it cost around $1.3 thousand in US dollars with insurance, which we consider to be quite a lot. Had my skateboard thrown out and was never allowed to own one ever again. Stupidest thing about this, I was aware of how common and dangerous skateboard accidents are. Never had training or proper protection and was repeatedly warned by my family and parents. I'm not very smart. Story 6. Camping with 2 kids as a non-outdoorsy family. We've realized we're neighborhood outside people. That is, parks and backyards and ponds. We aren't mountain trail, no flushing toilets, outdoorsy people. We tried camping, and after our toddler had near constant accidents from being scared to pee in vaulted toilets, a rained-out fire, and realized our tent was a very snug, we noped home before full night fell. Story 7. Sailing. I once dreamed of living on a sailboat, promised myself I'd take lessons for years, read about them, watched videos, even took an amazing trip down the bay with a retired Navy man who had me believing. Then I did a fast-track day-long lesson with 2 other guys, and the 3 of us capsized 9 times. I was the only person strong heavy enough to right the boat, while our instructor sat in a small boat a few yards away. Each time, I came home bruised, waterlogged, and exhausted. It was almost traumatizing, but it also effectively closed the book on sailing for me. Story 8. That quick, sharp poke you felt to the bottom of your foot but didn't see any blood nor felt any pain when you stopped running and nothing on your socks. So you kept running, and then when you finally stopped and see a trail of blood and your sock is now red? Yeah, that was a PVC pipe cut at an angle hidden in a pool of mud going through your foot. Don't run through construction sites. I was 14. My mother almost refused to take me to the hospital and let me sit with my stupidity for a moment before taking me. Story 9. Alrighty, it's February 2007 in the cold as balls country of Canada. My platoon and I are in training in a nearby town for a winter exercise. We have with us a Zodiac inflatable boat and a long, long hill with plenty of snow. We can easily fit 30 peoples on board. So boys being boys, we decide to inflate it and slide down the long-ass hill while Corporal Langlois simply says, as long as you fully assume the outcome, then go ahead. So, the Zodiac is now ready. Everyone except for Corporal Langlois and myself are on board, and I give them the push. Down, down, down the went, laughing and cheering. Little did they knew, down that hill there was a wire fence that barely poked out of the snow. Now, they were approximately all the way down and going at an honestly worrisome speed when some started to realize what was about to happen. From the top of the hill, all we could hear was, "Brake! Break! Wha-bam!" right in the fence. That day, Many men had a taste of how it feels to be in the Air Force, and that snow, while good at breaking a fall, will nonetheless be a literal pain in the ass, face side when you end your short-lived flight into it. By some sort of miracle, no one had anything broken. Unlike the Zodiac, the fence had pierced it in several places and even ripped of some chunks of it. We all got a really unpleasant earful afterward by a Corporal Langlois who hadn't laughed that hard in years. Boys will be boys. Story 10. Moving into house with your uncle being landlord with promise to sell you house, then reneged on the offer after mom, his sister, passed away while my sisters and him are screwing me over out of my inheritance by renting mom's house with uncle being the landlord of that house. He legally can't evict us at moment, as in process of bankruptcy, but if I have discharge before Nov, I'm filing probate. 2-year mark will be in deck, which is time limit in my state. Screw him and screw my sisters. This is vendetta as they hate my wife, who has done nothing but help. Improve I went fro. Being a person satisfied working part-time and relying on others to working a nice full-time government job. I don't care about them renting, but I do need to get my name on Bean Deed. Story 11. When I was a teenager, I got real mad after an argument with my mom. Rather than destroy something, I figured hitting my bed with a baseball bat would be a non-destructive way of letting off some steam. First big swing caused that bat to go flying directly back towards my skull, and I barely dodged it. Suddenly, I wasn't as angry anymore, LOL. That was 3 decades ago, and I still clearly remember it. Story 12. Jumping off my second-story deck onto a picnic table below when I was 11-ish. I could have seriously been injured. It was summer, and my parents went out to the store for like an hour. I was a weird kid and wanted to see if I could do it. I knocked the wind out of me so badly. I think I thought I was dead. I had a huge scrape down my neck for some reason. I had to put on a turtleneck to cover it up in summer. Picnic table obliterated. I jerry-rigged it back up. A few weeks later, my dad went to sit on it, and it completely dumped him on the ground. Grounding #213 of my childhood. Story 13. Truck driving. I was a driver for years. Started off carrying passengers, later moved into freight, but I always wanted to drive big rigs. So I went to a trucking school, got all the certs, and passed with flying colors. I then got hired to teach at the same school because all CDLs were being switched from Class 1 to Class A, which meant every driver had to come back for recertification. Teaching wasn't the problem, though. Even by the time I graduated the course, I was having second thoughts about truck driving. The money wasn't as good as I'd expected, and the hours were brutal. But the worst aspect of it was how much vehicle code you need to know, and learning it, I discovered that the basic presumption for truck drivers is that no matter what happens, it's your fault. You are literally presumed guilty and must prove your innocence. It gets worse, though, because employers can and will require you to take out vehicles that won't pass inspection. And if you get inspected, who gets fined? The employer? No, you do. Long story short, I taught one class, saw my students through to graduation, and then went back to driving smaller vehicles. Story 14. Riding my scooter late at night after my mom told me not to. The front wheel got caught in a big crack in the driveway, and I went over the handlebars and smashed my face on the concrete. I knocked out my entire front tooth, including the root, and significantly chipped about 8 other teeth. My mom had to put my tooth back in my mouth in order to prevent the tooth from dying. It has about a 15-minute window, as per an emergency dentist phone operator's instructions. Then, at the dentist that night, she had to glue my tooth to the teeth surrounding it to prevent it from falling back out. And that night, I had to sleep sitting up so I wouldn't choke in case it fell out again. The cherry on top is that this was the night before Thanksgiving, so that Thanksgiving, I had to eat everything mashed up or in liquid form with straws. Fun stuff. Moral of the story. When your mother tells you to go inside to bed instead of going on your scooter at 11 p.m., just do it. Story 15. Taping a foam head to my shoulder for twin day at school. The idea of theme was to dress up the same as a friend, but I had an odd number and was sick the day the theme was announced. So I taped a foam head to my shoulder to go as a conjoined twin. Turns out no matter how lightweight it is, having your posture messed up for a full school day because you taped something to your shoulder is incredibly painful. I was in tears by the end of the day and finally said screw it and had my friends help me rip off the tape. My mom taped it on. That damn tape went all the way down to my underwear for some reason. I ended up with a messed up back for a few days and a rash down my back because it turns out duct tape, or at least the kind we used, has latex in it, and I'm allergic. Everyone thought my costume was amazing, and it's a decent story, but I still wouldn't recommend it. Story 16, scuba diving. I imagined being down there peacefully observing nature, like watching a documentary, but in person. Then we took lessons. OMG, is it hellish. The noises of the gear are so loud, the clanking, the bubbles, always so much noise. I found myself holding my breath too much just to get a break from the breathing noises and the vision-obscuring bubble cloud. And even just a few feet below the surface in the pool, the pressure caused terrible ear pain. Last but not least, I suppose with practice you'd master it, but as a rookie, I found it so hard to remember to breathe in my nose and out my mouth, I could barely think of anything else. When we went to the ocean for that vacation, we took a snorkeling trip instead, and it was everything I wanted. No noise, no pressure pains. If I forgot to breathe properly, I could just lift my head and pull the mask aside anytime. Practically zero risk of death, and we got to see tons of awesome things. Story 17, climbing blind through a tiny cave that my friend and I found. It had squeezed through openings on each end and a 7DX5HX6W in feet room between them. My buddy went first and found the other opening, but both were very hidden by natural debris. He felt around in there to give the size, then I went and did the same thing. We did a few times because it was just so cool. Yeah, but we came back with a flashlight, so maybe that was the bad idea. That little room was almost coated with a disturbing number of rather large spiders that were luckily a bit sluggish as it was cool in there. 100% terrifying. Like unreal. I'm in Wisconsin, so there wasn't too much to worry about. Still, sweet eBay Jeebus. Story 18, jumped from a 2-meter abandoned garage into a small snowdrift. It turned out there was a copper sheet sticking out there that tore the skin off my right front part of the shin. I had to call an ambulance. It was terribly painful. And on top of everything else, I was terribly afraid of blood poisoning, and the fact that I would have to cut off my leg was so creepy. Nasty story. Story 19, taking Greyhound bus lines from Mississippi to Washington. Met some great people and saw a lot of the USA, but wouldn't recommend. During bus transfers, ask questions and make sure you are getting on the right bus. Better to have an annoyed bus driver, but at least headed to the right destination. Story 20, exploring this abandoned school near my house. I'll elaborate quickly. There is this school quite near my house, and it's an abandoned one. And for some reason, me and my sister and cousin went and explored it. And long story short, a dude like 20 minutes later strolled up on a bike, and by this point I got chills, but this dude pulls out a gun on us, yelling at us to get out. He aims it directly in my face as I'm walking away, listening to him telling us to get out. We got the fuck out of there as fast as possible. But now, a few years later, they are renovating it. Wonder if bro is still hanging out there. Story 21, breaking curfew with a friend, then running from a cop. Ran down a very dark hill toward a lit parking lot. Almost there. Oh wait, the hill stops at a 12 feet. Tall retaining wall that drops off into the parking lot. Too late. Too dark to see the ground below. Landed from a 12-foot fall directly on my knees. The cop felt sorry for me and helped me up, then gave me a ride home. My knees were never the same. That was 30 years ago. Story 22. I'd get sent to my grandparents' lake house for a month every summer when I was little. The local kids and I got a bow and arrows one year that we'd all take turns shooting. Well, because I wanted to prove that I was braver than the boys, I had the amazing idea to bring long socks and lighter fluid one weekend so we could do flaming arrows. See, we didn't think it would be dangerous because we agreed to aim at the lake. Fun fact, flaming arrows don't fly like normal arrows, plus they drip fire. We set 2 acres on fire before it was put out. Apparently, we were super lucky it wasn't much worse. I'm still shocked that we were never caught. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, like it. Be sure to write comments and share your stories.